and welcome everybody to this session today. We're going to be looking at literature reviews and generative AI, tips, tools and techniques. My name is Chris Irwin and I am Head of Digital Skills at Goldsmiths University of London. I'm going to turn on subtitling for PowerPoint, which is AI powered, so apologies if it gets my my words wrong. Now I am on a slightly bizarre multi-screen setup, so I can't keep checking the chat all of the time, but I will try to drop in as often as I possibly can. So let's move on to today's session. So some quick housekeeping. Please keep your mics muted unless you have to ask a burning question. Sometimes people do forget that and it gets quite distracting hearing dogs barking or the police sirens going past your window. If you need my attention urgently, please do raise your hand. The little Teams preview icon in the corner of my screen will register that, so I'll be able to see that, but I won't be able to see new messages in the chat unless I reopen the Teams window to check. Please do put any questions in the chat. I've enabled the Q&A function, which you can also make use of. But it is, I've never used it as a facilitator before, so I'll probably forget to check it. But please do just pop anything in the chat if you'd like to ask. There'll be plenty of time for questions at the end of the session, so I'll have an online Padlet for you to submit some questions to, and you can also use the chat, or at the end of the session, unmute yourself and ask away. And we're going to be using several different AI tools for this session. Please, please, please do not upload any copyrighted material, so any journal articles that are under copyright protection, or any personal data, either your own personal data or personal data that you're holding for research purposes. That is bad generative AI practice. And we'll maybe touch on some of that as we go through today's session. So here is our agenda. We're going to start with an introduction, very brief introduction. I've allowed myself plenty of time for each section because I want you to shower me with questions. It's going to be a bit interactive, a bit practical, so please do be enthusiastic and get involved. And then the first section, we're going to be looking at some literature searching techniques. So we're going to be looking at using LLMs for literature searching and some kind of generative AI tools that are specifically designed for literature searching. Then at around 3:30, we will have a 15-minute break, depending on how much time we're kind of eating up using the tools. After the break, we'll have a look at some generative AI tools that are geared specifically towards literature reviews. And then finally, at about 4:30 for the remainder of the session, we'll have a chance for you to ask some questions, have some reflection, and then wrap up the session. So like I said before, we're going to be using lots of generative AI tools today. Some of them you will need to create a free account to use, but I will give you plenty of time to do that. Nothing that we're doing today will cost any money. However, some of the tools do have enhanced features and functionality that you can access if you're willing to pay the $10 subscription fee. But everything that we're doing today is free, and you won't have to put in any credit card information when you sign up. If you do, please do flag me, put your hand up, put something in the chat, because I've double checked everything today and I haven't had to do that. So hopefully that is the same for you. So, introduction. I'll introduce myself a bit more, and then we'll go through some details of the session in some more detail. So as I said before, my name is Chris. I'm Head of Digital Skills at Goldsmiths down here in London. My job is to develop and deliver digital skills teaching and learning across all of the college. If you're unfamiliar with Goldsmiths, we're predominantly creative arts, humanities, with some social sciences. And I am involved in developing and delivering digital skills, and a lot of that for the past couple of academic years has been centered around using generative AI. So my background is actually not in computer science or anything digital. I was actually a theatre technician for several years, which got me into teaching technical theatre, teaching and facilitating performance and drama workshops. That got me into teaching, and then I've kind of found myself in this role where I'm doing lots of digital skills things, which started off being creative digital skills, but as I mentioned, is a lot more focused around generative AI. So I'm not a researcher in the traditional sense. I'm hoping to get a little bit of input from you, lovely people, on what is useful for yourselves as research students. But I do research into generative AI within teaching and learning, particularly in higher education, and the different industries and professional contexts that people are using generative AI in, depending on who I'm teaching, what course, what program, etc., etc. My focus is usually on the critical use of generative AI because undergraduates, some postgraduates are very over-reliant on generative AI. And I focus on developing kind of a critical lens before jumping in and using the tools. But today, I'm hoping that your critical skills are already up to scratch, and we're going to be looking at the tools that we're using critically. So like I said, we're going to be focusing on using the tools, not so much on the criticality, but I'm hoping that we'll have a little bit of that coming through in our discussions and reflections as well. So that's our brief introduction. So these are the learning outcomes for the session. By the end of today, you will have developed some skills and strategies for searching and reviewing literature using large language models. We're going to be evaluating different generative and generative AI tools for searching and reviewing literature. And you're also going to gain some hands-on practical experience using generative AI tools for research purposes. Now, we're going to move on quickly to a Padlet. So what I would like you to do is I'm going to share the link to the Padlet in the chat. You can see I've split it into sections just to try and keep this Padlet board organized. This question is our top question for today. So you can just press the little plus here, and then you can pop your thoughts. Any images or documents that you'd like to share, any links, please do. Pop your thoughts in there, and we'll see where we're starting this session today. And hopefully we'll be able to address any of your concerns, maybe build a bit of confidence. I'm interested to know what your expectations of this session are. And hopefully we'll see some things appear shortly. And as we go through the session today, we'll be filling up all of these different areas with the different tools that we're using. Useful tool to explain concepts or theory in simple terms. Create accessibility into high-level work, okay. Efficiency, yes, it's a good base for searching literature quickly, absolutely. Good academic practice, check the grammar and make brainstorms. Completely new to using generative AI. Okay, use of Grammarly. Not a tool we're going to be using today, but Grammarly is an often used generative tool. Risk of hallucinations. Absolutely, we always want to be mindful that AI is giving us incorrect information or just fabricating all sorts of weird and wonderful things. Powerful tool or assistant, but lots of ethical concerns and questions. A very disruptive technology. I'm inclined to agree. The more I teach and make students aware of some of the pitfalls and concerns around generative AI, the more I question whether or not I should be using them. But as one of my colleagues says, Pandora's box has been opened. There's nothing we can do to keep generative AI back in. Okay, I see people are filling in further down. Maybe we've got some experience using other tools. I look forward to getting your thoughts on those as we continue. Okay. You work alone, it can help. Feel like the sounding board. Okay. Okay, we've got some fake research literature. Yes, it does like to bullshit/hallucinations. Again, one of my Goldsmiths colleagues is on record saying that AI is a bad bullshit machine. Okay. That's great. Thank you for having those. Keep those thoughts coming in, and we'll start filling up the board further down as we go. Okay, so I thought since we're doing literature reviews today, we would start with a mini literature review of some of the literature that's out there on using generative AI for literature reviews. Yes, that makes sense. The majority of the research that I found when I was researching this yesterday and last week was mainly around using generative AI chatbots. So things like ChatGPT, Google Gemini, rather than using the tools that are more geared towards academic research, which I thought was interesting. Perhaps there's a little gap in the research there. But I would not trust my research skills at all. So maybe if that's something that you'd like to research, you might want to have a look at that. So just quickly going through, I'll provide a full bibliography of all of these sources at the end of the PowerPoint, and it will also be on the slide deck that I'll pop in the chat at the end of the session as well. So it'll probably come as no surprise to you that generative AI is very good at searching lots and lots of different things, okay? Several studies have identified that there's an impressive breadth of knowledge, but it's the depth that becomes troublesome when using these tools. Yes, you can cast your net widely, but you can't really drill down into what the research is on about because generative AI, large language models, simply struggle to understand context. They are, I like to call them glorified predictive texting machines. Yeah, they're trained on huge amounts of data and they work out what associations exist between different words and then link those words together. They generate a statistically probable output. There is evidence that suggests generative AI can effectively develop search queries for different databases, and we're going to have a little go with doing some of that later using an LLM and generating queries for Scopus. There are lots of gaps and potential pitfalls when using generative AI tools, so we still need human experts to evaluate and refine outputs. And what some studies have found is that we need to be iterative. We need to consistently challenge what the outputs of these models are. We need to iterate. We need to have a dialogue with them to get the most out of them. It's not enough to simply pop one prompt in and expect to get the perfect answer. Again, no surprise, they are very quick at finding relevant results, but maybe they don't find all of the results that could be relevant to you when you're doing your literature review, doing your systematic review of the literature. And there are also concerns about the reproducibility. I'm surprised I managed to say that one correctly. There are concerns about the reproducibility of searches undertaken using generative AI tools, which is one of the key aspects of doing a systematic literature review is can the search results that you're getting from a database, from a search Are they easily reproducible? Can they be verified by somebody else who is reading your work? Using generative AI tools means that people are going to get different responses probably every time. Okay, so again, you can read these articles in more detail. There's quite an extensive bibliography at the end of these slides that I will share with you. So, on to searching. Now, the format of this is we're quite heavy on the slides at the beginning before we then taper off into actually getting into using some tools. Okay, so we've got quite a bit of information to go through before we get on to using the tools. I'm just going to check the chat. No questions. Excellent. So, using tools for searching, we're going to start with LLMs, okay, and some prompt engineering. Now, I have scoured the web over several years trying to find the best ways to prompt. There are lots and lots of ways of doing it. Some of them are better for certain subjects. Some of them are not so great for academic research. I see lots of students, particularly undergraduate students, just popping their essay question into ChatGPT and expecting a fully realized perfect result, which of course is problematic on so many levels. But it all comes down to putting in a good prompt. Okay, in prompt engineering. If you put something vague in, you're going to get a vague response. If you put something specific in, then of course your response is going to be more detailed. So on to some frameworks that you might want to consider when it comes to crafting the first prompt that you're putting into an LLM. I found that the CAST framework is quite helpful. So CAST stands for Criteria, Audience, Specifications, and Testing. So let's have a quick look at some of these. So criteria, what rules and norms do you need to follow when it comes to the type of language using, the vocabulary, the length, the format, the purpose, or the destination of your output? Give the AI all of that information, okay? It's all valuable context to help shape the output. Here's the target audience. I'm not going to explain that one because hopefully you all know who that is or what target audience refers to. Specifications might be some additional context where you might want to review and iterate. You might include a particular research topic or some specific journals or databases that you want the AI to consider in its output. And then finally, we've got a testing phase. So what are we doing to review and evaluate your prompt and to then develop it further? Is it what you expected? Okay. Is it too general? Is it too specific? Have any assumptions been made or any biases identified in that output? Can you challenge those biases? Can you challenge those assumptions? Of course, with a lot of AI models, they are trained on largely Western-centric data. So is your output completely neglecting voices from the global south, voices from marginalized communities? Okay. Feel free to argue with your generative AI model or try another model. You might get wildly different results using ChatGPT versus using Gemini. So this is what a CAST-based prompt might look like. Provide me a list of academic sources for my PhD project. How is anti-intellectual sentiment constructed in working class digital communities in post-Brexit England? A lovely topic, I'm sure you'll agree. This list will be the starting point for my literature review. Provide me with working URLs to each source you provide. Now, when I've used this in an LLM in the past, the first time I did this a couple of years ago, it provided me with what looked to be a lovely list of references, properly formatted. However, when I started to click through the URLs, I quickly discovered that many of the sources were hallucinations. Okay, it took me to the home pages of big academic publishers, but then I couldn't actually find the articles, the book chapters that it was citing. So I will say, however, that in the past few years, the hallucinations seem to be getting less and less. To actually, I'm now struggling to remember any occasion recently where it's provided something that I've identified as false quickly. So we always want to be double checking, okay? So let's just break this down again. So we've got our criteria. So it's the starting point of we want a list of academic sources. Okay, we've given it some specifications for a PhD project, for a literature review. We've also specified that we want some working URLs to the sources. Okay, we've also defined kind of a target audience implicitly. You know, it's for a literature review, it's for PhD projects, so it's maybe going to use some academic English. You know, it's maybe going to be quite high level compared to if we were preparing something for a social media post. Okay, and we'll pop this into an LLM in a little while, and we'll compare the results with the next prompting framework that we're going to have a quick look at. So this is the create framework. Slightly different. There's a lot of overlaps, but I find this to be slightly more effective than the cast framework. Hopefully, you'll have an opportunity to try these two frameworks out yourself in a little while, and you can, decide yourself. So we want to define a character or a role or a persona for the AI tool to play. That can be very helpful in shaping our output. We want to be specific about what we want the AI to actually do. It might be helpful for us to provide an example output. So this is what I expect the output of my prompt to look like. Are there any additional adjustments? So are there any specific sources to focus on? Are we just looking at academic journals? Are we looking at a specific database? Are we telling the AI what we don't want it to do? Maybe we want to try and reduce all of the toxically positive fluff that LLMs like to, beef up their outputs with. Let's try and strip away all of that by telling it just do exactly what I say. Don't try and evaluate or give an opinion or anything like that. What is the type of output? So what is the format? Do we want bullet points? Do we want a list? Do we want a particular word count? Any language? What kind of vocabulary? And then finally, are there any extras? You'll see that there's no kind of specific testing or evaluation. That's absolutely fine. We can combine the two frameworks together, okay, into something that works for our purposes. So this is what a create prompt would look like. So you're undertaking a PhD in social sciences at a UK university. So we're outlining a particular character there that we want the AI to play. Please prepare a 10-item list of academic sources for your PhD project. How is anti-intellectual sentiment constructed in working-class digital communities in post-Brexit England? Okay, so we're giving it a specific request about what we want the AI to do. You should include URLs for the sources if possible, and the list should be formatted in the Harvard referencing style. Okay, we've got some output there. What type of output do we want it to be? We want it to be a list. We want it to be Harvard referencing. And now some adjustments. Prioritize articles from academic journals like those published by Taylor and Francis, by Sage, by Springer Nature. And then I've asked it to explain the reasoning and rationale behind each item on the list and how it relates to your research question. List items in order of relevance to your research question. Okay. So again, we've got quite a chunky prompt to start with. Okay. And that's going to maybe get us some good results, some bad results, maybe some medium level results. So what can we do next to continue on our iteration journey, on our research journey using our LLMs? Okay. Well, that's when we can think about some different prompting strategies. And I've listed some here. If you have a quick Google LLM prompting strategies, you will find there are hundreds and hundreds. I have found these to be quite useful, these top 5. So we've got chain of thought, which is essentially breaking down a problem into smaller chunks that you might want to talk the AI through. And we'll have a look at this in action when we come to developing some search queries in a little moment. So you might want to say, do this first, bring me my list of sources, format into Harvard referencing style, filter out anything from 2015 to 2025, etc. We've got tree of thought, which is a hierarchical approach. So we might want to begin quite broad, get an overview of a topic before we can then try and pull out different strands from the output for us to dig deeper into. We can do some meta prompting, which is where we ask the LLM to write prompts for itself or for another LLM. And we'll maybe with our search query development, that could maybe be a bit of meta prompting, especially when many databases these days are using AI to augment their search capabilities. We've got some reflexive prompting techniques where we are asking the LLM to evaluate its earlier outputs against a particular criteria or against some research that you've done. But remember, don't put all of your research secrets into an LLM, we want to be mindful of that always. And then finally, dialogic prompting, which is, having a dialogue, a conversation, kind of knuckling down and saying, why is this? Why is that? Why are you biased in this way? How can we brainstorm a structure for a literature review? If we're going back to my post-Brexit working class digital communities example, which articles mentioned Facebook specifically? Okay, can you offer an opposing perspective? Okay, so we can be quite dialogic in our approach. And I've just popped this quotation at the bottom here, which I think is quite helpful to remember. So Wang's study from 2023, which again is in the bibliography, they found that showing that generating a good prompt is really paramount. Multiple prompting interactions with ChatGPT are better than a single interaction, which again, I've tried to reiterate. So one more slide before we get into using an LLM, which is prompt, which is a helpful, I can never remember if these are called acronyms or mnemonics, just from the Open University. It's a method for evaluating sources, okay? And I think it's really applicable to evaluating generative AI outputs, especially because it's called prompt. So I'm not going to go into this in a huge detail because I'm hoping that you are already familiar with how to analyze and evaluate the sources that you've got. But we've got presentation, so how is the information being presented to you? Relevance, is it relevant to your research question? Is it relevant to the area that you're researching in? Does it seem objective? What is the method? What's the methodology of the research study? How is the information being obtained? How can you know that the information is reliable? And finally, is the information up to date? Has it been discounted by any studies more recently? Okay, and all of this is in the slide deck, which I can share in the chat now, actually, because you may want to go back and just have a look at the might just want to go back and have a quick look at some of those mnemonics. So just bear with me. Let me just answer some of these questions. Which platform do you find, or do you find all platforms okay now? I'm not sure what you're referring to with that question, but maybe we'll pick it up at the end. I think one of the problems with such search is that AI tools possibly won't be able to find sources that are non-open access or behind paywall. Exactly. Yes, you are correct. That makes perfect sense. Some of the tools that we're going to be using today actually have got specific agreements with academic publishers to access some of that paywalled material. So bear that in mind. Yes, you would think that LLMs, like ChatGPT or Google Gemini, maybe can't access that paid that content behind paywalls. But as well, remember that some of the tech companies are not always being transparent about where they're getting their data from. Okay, and if they're not being transparent, then you might ask yourself, oh, have they got something to hide about getting the data? Have they gotten it maybe by illegitimate means? No worries, Stephanie. Thank you. Yes, the recording will be shared. Mean in reference to getting accurate links. Yes, absolutely, Liz. It's definitely improved. I use a variety of different LLMs, so ChatGPT, Claude AI, and also Google Gemini, and they are all a lot more reliable than they were 2 years ago when it comes to generating proper links to, and again, generally open access is better. Sometimes it will take you to, the kind of front matter page on a journal's website, but then you get the little, spend £30 on this article or sign in through your institution. So is there much difference in choosing one and over the other? As personal preference, you have to experiment and see what works for you. It really, it's like, how long is a piece of string really? They all operate in slightly different ways. I speak to some people and they think that Gemini is the best, and we'll maybe look at, that's what I'm going to use in a moment, and you'll maybe I'll point out some of those options as to why it might be more superior. I find Claude to be quite good personally. So yeah, it really is down to you to experiment and see what works. ChatGPT I find quite toxically positive, and it doesn't always have much substance. It'll be like, yes, that's a great research question. Let's dive deeper. And then it really doesn't dive deeper at all. So let's have a look at Google Gemini. So the reason I am using Google Gemini today, I would like to encourage you to use whatever LLM you fancy. It's entirely up to you. Is because on this little tools button, I can press deep research, okay? And that's going to take a little bit more time with my searching, but hopefully, theoretically, I'm going to get better results. I've also got this little fast drop down. And again, I can maybe change this to something a bit more thinking, pro. Again, experiment, see what works, what doesn't. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste my prompt from before as a starting point. And we're going to go for my cast prompt from earlier. So, of course, I don't have it easily to hand, do I? Because that would be far too easy. Did I pop it in here? Ah, right. Well, I'm going to use the create prompt rather than the cast prompt. Okay. Yes, we don't want to worry about that. I'm not sure why it always uploads an image when I copy and paste. So you can see I've popped my prompt in here. It's formatted it slightly bizarrely, but let me just sort that out. I don't want anything to screw with my output unnecessarily. Let's press submit and see what we get. And as usual, when we demonstrate the tools, they always take longer. Now, I should point out I've used some of the enhanced options, so the deep research, the thinking option instead of the fast option. You will have a certain number of uses. Okay. Now this is just a load of rubbish, isn't it? Great to meet a fellow traveller in the often exhausting but rewarding world of PhD research. Oof. I mean, I have given it a roll. PhD bibliography, okay. So we've got at least a list. Is it 10 items like I requested? Yeah. So let's have a click on one of these links to see whether or not it actually does exist as an academic piece of work. Okay. Explaining Brexit. Okay, well that looks okay. Can we download a PDF perhaps? I've got libkey nomad installed here, which is a browser extension. Again, it's an AI tool. If you are unfamiliar with it, please pop a message in the chat and maybe we can cover it at the end of the session. It is very useful when you're on a page like this and you can't see the obvious button to access the PDF. You can just press that big button and there it will download it just for you. Okay. So that does look like it actually exists as an article, which is a good start. Okay. Let's just double check number 2 in case. Yeah. Okay, we've got open access, I think, as well. Heritage of Brexit roles in the past. Yeah. So that looks good. Now let's try going through and challenging some of this. So let's maybe change the format. Can you provide this as a reference list in Harvard format? Okay, let's see what it does. Just wait a little bit. Oops. Okay, we've got a rationale, which is good. They look like Harvard referencing, which is good. Maybe we want to, oh, we've got some tips, how helpful. Okay, maybe we want to start challenging some of these. So again, I'm going to show up my lack of research experience. Some of these sources are from French journals, but the research question is about working class communities in the UK. Can you explain why you have chosen these French journals. And let's see what it comes back with. It definitely takes longer than the normal Gemini. Okay, so it's given an attempt there. Um, oh, okay. We're getting a bit sassy. These are not just French journals. Okay, so maybe it's actually been quite helpful. I've certainly learned something from that. So I'm thinking if I give you maybe 15 minutes to start experimenting with an LLM of your choice, okay? You can use Copilot, you could use ChatGPT, you can use Gemini, you can use Claude. I saw somebody mention Perplexity. Try experimenting with the same prompt and the different options that are available. Maybe try the fast version and the deep research version. I think ChatGPT has something similar. Compare the outputs and start sharing on the Padlet under the second option down. So under using an LLM, start putting your thoughts in there. And maybe we'll come back in about 15 minutes and you'll have some really interesting insights to share before we move on. What I'll do is I'll just slowly kind of move through the slides because I can't share them, or maybe I'll work out how to share them in the Teams chat in the background, because that's really unhelpful. But I will share them with the team and they can then forward them on to all of the participants as well with the recording. Okay, so I'll go back to this and I'll also have a look what's happening in the chat. Thank you. I've not heard of Asta Allen AI, but I'll definitely make a note of that. Thank you very much for bringing that to my attention. It's not one that I've come across before, but I'll definitely check it out. Okay, people not familiar with libkey nomad. I'm not sure why one should be using, these are questions from the chat, LLMs for literature reviews. We're diving really quickly into the practicalities, but I'd like to hear more about the pros and cons in detail. Okay, that's not what I was planning for this session, but maybe if you have some questions, some specific questions, maybe we can discuss them at the end. Apologies for that. I mean, I guess in the kind of mini literature review we started with, the pros are that it's quick, and you can cast your net widely quite quickly. But the cons are very much that it still requires an expert to go through. It's not going to catch everything. just as kind of a high-level overview. There's also issues with hallucinations, etc., etc. But maybe if you have some specific questions, we can discuss that at the end. I would struggle to think. Yes, I mean, lots of thoughts about actually using LLMs, but I do think it's not, they're not tools that you would use solely to do literature reviews. You still would want to think about using the more traditional methods of, writing search queries for databases, going through a library search, because it is not going to collect everything. There are just specific parts of the process that you might find, oh, okay, well, maybe I can use AI to speed this up a little bit. I certainly would not be trusting an AI to go into detail to find the literature, all of the literature that I think I would need for my project. And I'm not trying to suggest that is the case. Can you say a little bit about when you might use these approaches? So I would start these approaches as kind of at the beginning of the process. So it would be the initial scoping. What literature is out there in this topic. As a way to get started. Okay. The literature that using an LLM is only going to get you started in the process with potential avenues that you might want to explore. Okay. So here is the cast prompt. But he's added anything here? I have never tried Copilot before, but it has just cited my own paper. I now officially love it. Okay, fair enough. Found a reference on Claude, which I never found before. Please do double check that it does actually exist as a scholarly source. Gave me a reference that I happen to already know, but with the wrong author. Absolutely. But at least the link led to the correct paper. Okay. Shows about good prompting for using LLM in literature review. Oh, that's from 38 minutes ago. Okay. Hopefully I've done that. Oh, and author links did not match. Yes, I've had that many times where the things simply don't match. And the new reference on Claude does exist. You see, you can go away and do all of your manual searching, but then, using an LLM, you might just, uncover something, one little nugget of gold that's worth it. Good list of papers. A common thing that I hear from researchers that I work with is that, I already know all of this. It's given me, just a list of things that I'm already familiar with, or the other thing is that, oh, my research topic is very niche or very new, and it hasn't given me any kind of new insight. Using prompt is great. Half were pre-Brexit. Yes, exactly. Definitely. Sometimes it might be helpful to try to narrow it down, try to filter those results, saying, oh, only find me references between a certain date. Could be a way to go through that, or challenge it and say, well, how can these be about Brexit when this is pre-Brexit? Ask for the rationale behind it. The right links. I also not find literature I expected to find. Lots of books, not papers. Remember that the training data as well, these models are trained on data that exists up to a certain point in time, but they can also search the web, and sometimes things kind of fall between those gaps. It showed classic references in the literature rather than current research. Also did not capture the diversity in the literature. I'm struggling to understand why you would use when you can just use, surely if you've gotten this far, then you already know the key logic. Yes, you raise a valid point in the chat. I'm struggling to understand what you would use AI for literature, why you would use AI for a literature review when you can just search Google Scholar. Surely, if you have gotten this far, then you already know the key literature on your topic. Aren't you just creating an extra work that you're going to need to verify everything it gives you anyway? And that's time that could be spent reading abstracts and making connections yourself. Yes, you're absolutely right. It could be a waste of time. And like I say, other researchers that I work with, they all say, why would I do this? But it's just one tool that you could potentially use. I'm not suggesting that everybody needs to change the way that they're working in order to accommodate AI. If searching Google Scholar works for you, then that's great. Okay, so we're going to move on and we're going to start using our trusty LLM to develop a search query for a database. And I've got some different prompts here, just like before. And maybe we'll go through them. And again, we're thinking about the prompt strategies that we talked a little bit about before. So this first one, I would like to conduct a literature review on the impact of generative AI tools in secondary school pupils in England. Please provide me with the words to enter into Scopus using Boolean operators so that I can research, so that I can find research on this topic. Okay. We've also got something a little bit more in depth. Okay. And again, these articles all in the bibliography, so you can read up about these in more detail. So you can see if you have a quick scan through this, this prompt has kind of broken it down into three steps that it wants the AI to follow. So number one is breaking the topic into functional components and brainstorming a comprehensive list of possible synonyms. Which, if you go back to our literature review slide at the beginning, one of the strengths of LLMs is that it can find lots of keywords and lots of synonyms quite quickly, rather than us trying to do it ourselves. Not saying that it's going to be exhaustive, but it might just uncover something that you hadn't considered. Number two, designing an inclusive Boolean search string that incorporates these terms and is able to capture a wide range of relevant literature. And three, creating an exclusive list of inclusion criteria that can be used to screen the titles and abstracts of potential papers. Okay, so that's another prompt that we might want to use. And now I've got one more, which is a three-step prompt. And I will pop all of these in the chat so you can have a go with them. I'm not going to bother demoing. I might demo the last one so we can see it in Scopus because I've got that open. So follow my instructions precisely to develop a highly effective Boolean search query for social sciences systematic review literature search. Do not explain or elaborate. Remember, we were telling the AI what not to do. So we don't want any explanation. We don't want any elaboration. We only want it to do exactly what we're saying. Given the following statement and text from a relevant study, please identify 50 terms or phrases that are relevant. Okay, and then we've got our statement at the bottom. UK higher education lecturers negotiation of pedagogical and ethical tensions of generative AI tools for assessment. So I'm going to start by popping that into Gemini. Okay, let me go and create a new chat. So there we are. Let's pop that in. So we're hopefully going to get a list of key terms that we might want to consider in our Scopus search. My ear is being slow. Okay, so we've got some key words. Now we're going to move on to our next step on our slides. So for each term in the list, we want to classify it into something relating to the ethical concerns, relating to pedagogy, and some terms relating to some tools, technology and tools. Now I used ChatGPT for this yesterday, and I haven't tried it with Gemini, so it'll be interesting to compare the results. So we're doing this 3-step process here. We're identifying the keywords. Then we maybe want to categorize our keywords for our search. Okay. You can see it's doing something there. And of course, if I was being diligent, I'd be going through and just double checking the work that it's doing before finally I get it to format my keywords into a proper query that I can then put into Scopus. Okay. Okay, now that is looking quite comprehensive. What I might want to do now is let's see if we can copy and paste this into Scopus. Okay, so I'm on Advanced Search in Scopus. Let's see what happens. There's going to be nothing, knowing my luck. Aha. Let's have a look. Edit in Advanced Search. Right. I'm just going to give it another go just in case. Maybe we've done something a little bit too complex. Okay. Now I wish I could. Well, ChatGPT's attempt yesterday was far better, I have to say. Maybe if you have a go using ChatGPT, I'm just having a quick look through. What I might do is if I just try and delete half of it, just to see if that works for us, to at least get some kind of results. No. Secondary documents, perhaps. Okay. Well, I'm not going to dwell on this, but hopefully you get the idea, okay? I'm just going to show you one more thing, okay? And then I'll give you a chance to go through and have a go creating a search string using an LLM, okay? And what I'm going to show you is a specific, I'm just conscious of the time, that's all, is a research tool that is geared towards literature searching, okay? So let me put the link in the chat, which I'm sure some of you may have heard about, which is called Research Rabbit, okay? The format is wrong. Thank you. That is very helpful. You can tell that I'm not very clued up on my Boolean search strategies. So I've popped in Research Rabbit into the chat. So you can click, you might have to create an account. You never used to, but I think you do now. This is free to access. And what this allows you to do is to visually see the connections between different research papers. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop in a research paper. It's going to be one of the ones that's in the bibliography. Okay, I'm just copying and pasting the DOI. So if I press search, oh, I was in there yesterday. I missed the 3 off the end. There we are. So can ChatGPT, that's the right article. And then what I can do is I can browse similar articles. I can look at references, and I can look at where that article has been cited. I'm going to start by looking for cited by, okay, just so you can see this working. So this article, the article that I've put in is called The Seed, and I know it's the seed because it's got this little like plant icon. Okay, seed is the articles that we're using to construct our search. Okay, and the arrows, if you look very carefully, you can see that all of these nodes have got arrows pointing. Okay, that means these articles have cited this article. Okay. Now what I can do is I can go through and examine different articles. So I can look, instead of looking at where articles that have cited that one, I can see articles that have been cited in this article visually. So I can click on this. And I can very quickly maybe see that in the connections between this article, that these two are quite, in addition to my seeded article, the one that I started with, that these two seem to have quite a lot of connections. Okay, maybe this one not so much, just very quickly and visually based on the arrows. What I can do is if I just press reset down here, ones that are higher up, this is like a graph, so the more citations are further up here, the more recently something's been published, and moves further along here. And you can move these around just to kind of get a better view of the different things. You can see this one's maybe quite popular. So what I can then do is I can select different articles in my left-hand side here. So if I find this one by Brown, this one, I can then begin to construct a new search. Okay, there it is. Based on these, so I can seed a new search. And you can see that quite quickly I'm beginning to build up quite a complex web. Okay, and I can see quickly a visual representation of the connections between different research papers that might provide some new insights into my research question or project. And the same thing kind of applies as when we were looking at LLMs, is that when I've shown this to researchers in the past, they say, oh, well, this is great. It's, nice to see the research visualized in this way, but my research is so new, my area of research is so new, or my research area is so niche that actually this is not useful to me at all, because it's just telling me or finding things that I already know. Okay, so do bear that in mind. And this platform is powered by Semantic Scholar. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with it. That's just an AI-powered search tool for academic literature. I'll pop this link in the chat as well. But I'm not going to show you how to search a database, because as I've shown you with Scopus, I'm not very good at that. But you can see that I can do a natural language search here, and it'll search 230 million articles. So Research Rabbit pulls on that database, as well as a couple of others, I think, like OpenAlex, and allows you to explore the research in this quite visual way. Okay, and of course there is a premium paid for version. And then I can save this. So if I just come up here, I can continue exploring. You can see these advanced settings are only available if you're paying for it. And I can also kind of step back in time through all the different iterations of my search. Okay. And I can save it to different collections. And then they will appear in my library, which I think you can actually begin to import from Zotero, but I haven't tried that yet. Okay. Let me just come back. So if I give you maybe 10, 15 minutes, have a go with Research Rabbit, see if you can be more successful trying to search Scopus. I'm going to come back to that. And see if I can get this to do something useful based on the information I'm getting from the chat. And we'll see if I just need to tweak my Google Gemini to do something more useful for me. And yeah. Okay, everybody, welcome back. I hope you had a chance to have something to drink, stretch your legs. So we're now going to start to look at some research-focused generative AI tools. I've got 4 lined up to show you. So what I'm going to do is I'll run through each one, and then I'll give you some time to, I'll pop you into breakout groups, and then you can each assign yourself one, or all look at the same one, and then share what's working well, what you're surprised by, have a bit of reflection about whether or not you actually think it is useful to your research projects. So the first one is called Google Notebook LM, which I think if I look on the Padlet, some people are familiar with. I'll pop the link in the chat, and I came across this about a year ago because I saw on Reddit that students were singing its praises. Okay, so I think you do have to log in. You'll have to log in with a Google account, and I think it asks for some kind of verification, but it is a while since I've signed up, but it is free to use. And what you can do is I'm going to create a new notebook. Okay. And what I can do is I can find new sources by searching the web, or I can drop some sources into it here. So when we are using a tool like this, we don't want to be uploading any kind of copyrighted material, any personal data, because we don't know what Google is necessarily going to do with it, unless you want to trawl through the T's and C's. However, generally, open access materials are fine, because in theory, they've already been part of the corpus that the AI has been trained on. And you can see here we can pop in some copied text, we can access our Google Drive, we can look at YouTube, we can search. But what I'm going to do is we're going to upload some files. So I've got some of the articles from the bibliography, and maybe I just want to update, add in a couple of these just so we can see. I'm just going to select them at random because they are all largely on the same topic. Okay. You are limited to the number of sources that we can add. I think you can add 40 by default. And as soon as I've added them, we start to get an overview and some potential questions that we can ask. Okay. And what we've basically done here is we've trained almost our own AI agent on some literature that we've got, and now we can interact with it just like we can with any kind of AI chatbot. So you can see we've got an overview of all of the studies. Okay. We've got some potential questions down here. And then we've got the studio. Okay. Now this is quite impressive. We can generate an audio overview. I'll leave that to whir away in the background. Yes, Lydia, that is correct. You do need to check if something is copyright protected, then it will be an infringement of copyright, most likely, copyright law, to upload that item into a generative AI tool. Open access is largely okay. I have done quite a bit of research around this, and universities are generally saying the same thing, that if something is open access, then we're allowed to upload it, but your individual university guidance may be different. So while that's doing that, let's you may think so. It depends on the kinds of papers that you're analyzing. I don't think everything is behind a paywall necessarily. Maybe you just want to upload the stuff that is open access and have a go with that. So I can pop into here. I don't know. Let's have a think. Extract the methodology of each study. Quite a broad question, but hopefully it's one that we'll get a quick answer to. Okay, so then you can see we've got a little bit of an overview. I've extracted the methodology, so our first source, X method approach, and I can then hover over the little reference and see where it's come from. If I just click it there, it will actually go through and highlight the passage where it's referencing from. Same here. See if we can find the next one. Okay, so we've got the overview. Quality of literature reviews conducted by human researchers versus ChatGPT-4. And again, I can click through and find that information specifically. Okay. And we've got some helpful prompts down here. We can also save this to a note. I'm just waiting for this. We save a note. It appears over here like that. Okay, and it just saves that chat into something over here. Just waiting for this audio preview. You can also generate like a video overview, which in my experience is not always the most successful. The most successful way to use this, with any kind of AI generated imagery and text, it can look a little bit strange, a little bit stylistically confused, I think is an appropriate way to put it. But you can also generate a report, maybe like a quiz or a flashcard if you're doing any kind of teaching activities. But I find the audio preview to be quite fun. You can digest your articles into what's like a podcast, and then you can actually interact with that podcast and ask questions. Dustin says, Notebook LM compartmentalizes these, whereas something like ChatGPT wouldn't. You can make ChatGPT closed loop. Yes, you can. I mean, I've got experience doing that by running local LLMs. So rather than having my interface connected to something that has access to the internet, you can train a a large language model on items that you have on your computer hard drive. Might be a way around that if you did want to use an LLM to local LLM. Okay, there's a conversation happening in the chat. I'll come back to this audio preview, hopefully in a few minutes. But you can see that you can have multiple notebooks. You can see I've got a few different notebooks on the go here. So, you can organize your work quite easily. So let's move on. I'm going to show you Undermined, okay? And you can see that I'm on a pro trial at the bottom. Okay, so when you first sign up, you get a limited trial of the pro features, and then you have to subscribe. Okay, so I can pop in to Undermined here my research question, or I can put in a broad topic. Oops, I'll just move that over here. What I'm going to do is I've got one of my research questions. I'm going to pop it in. So my research question from earlier, how do UK higher education lecturers in humanities disciplines negotiate pedagogical and ethical tensions in adopting generative AI tools for assessment? Okay, and I'm going to press play. And let's see what's happening there. So I've put my question in, and what it's done is it's given me a little bit of fluff there from this very solid research question. And it wants to clarify a few things. Okay. So what I can do is it's given me an overview of some key parts of my question, and it's asking about what it sees as ambiguous. Okay, so what am I actually focused on? Is it lecturers developing assessments? Is it tools that students are using in assessment and how lecturers are responding to that? Okay, if I'm thinking about negotiating tensions, are we looking at the ethical side? Are we looking at the pedagogical side? Are we looking at the policies institutionally? So what I can do is I can answer some of these questions to hopefully get somewhere useful. So again, we can use some natural language. I was thinking around students, let's see, approaches to students using these tools in their assessments ethically by helping them critically think around generative AI tools. And let's see. Okay, so I haven't really given it much else to go on. I can answer its questions quite specifically. So let's do scope of critical thinking around AI. So let's do 1D. We want all of the above. We can do question 2. So I'm thinking about, we don't really want to redesign assessments. Let's go for 2C. And empirical Oh, I think we want 3A. Oops. I'll just pop that in and see what it comes back with. And now I've got a proposed search topic, and I can edit this as well using natural language if I so desire. I can now generate a research report. Now this is going to take some time. While that's doing that, maybe let's hop back to our audio overview in Notebook LM. It's still going. I'm giving the Wi-Fi bandwidth a run for its money. But I did prepare one of these earlier. So I'll go back to my history and you can see I've got one from this morning. So once you've generated a research report, this is what it looks like. Okay, so over here we've got an overview, okay, of the research topic. Down here we've got a very, very comprehensive reference list. You can see there are thousands of, over 200 nearly. Yeah, over 200 items there. And I've got this little match report. I mean, I don't know what it's basing that on. We would need to exercise some of our expert knowledge to actually, determine whether or not it is useful for my research topic. And you can see that just like in Google Gemini, we've got these little buttons where we can hover over and see exactly where it's getting that information from. We can even open the paper direct from there. Okay. Let's just dive into this a little bit more. So you can expand some of these, get an overview. It will produce you some tables. Okay. Or it can get an overview quite quickly of some of the key points of each study. Scroll down. We get a timeline of the results. You can see obviously there's a lot more available over the past couple of years compared to even just 3 years ago. Okay. And you've got, again, breakdown of this information into tables. And we can, of course, ask more information, okay, from the kind of overview that we've got. So I'm just going to click on one here, compare top findings. It'll generate a nice prompt for me. And of course, any of this we can edit to find specific bits of information. And it's thinking. And again, we get a breakdown based on the questions that we're asking. Okay. And it is organized into these different projects. So if we go over here to my history tab, we can access them from previous searches that we've done. Okay, so hopefully that's straightforward and you can have a play around with that. We'll move on to the next two tools. So elicit, I'll pop this into the chat and paste. Again, free to use initially, but you can pay for the premium version. You can see that the systematic review is grayed out because it is the pro version. I can pop my research question in again. I'm going to use the same research question and see if we get the same papers. Okay. I can drop this down, change between research papers and clinical trials. The AI is saying it's a great question. And again, I need to have the Plus or the Pro package, but I can still screen the top 50 and we'll generate a report. While that is running through, hopefully it doesn't take too long. Always takes longer when you're demonstrating some of these tools. And again, we're not thinking here about replacing the whole literature review process. These are simply tools that you may wish to engage with at different points during your research process. Okay. And with some of these, you will get an email when they have arrived. I do have some examples from earlier that I did manage to get a pro subscription for a limited period of time. I can show you the difference in detail that you get, hopefully, if it still allows me to access it, which it should do. But hopefully you can see that these tools tend to operate in the same way. You pop your research question or your research topic in, and it will do what feels like quite a thorough analysis because of the time that it takes to find information. And again, all of these tools are trained on the Semantic Scholar corpus, okay? Plus, some of them have got specific agreements, partnership deals with academic publishers, okay? So, well worth trying out a couple of them. You can find out more information on each website's like homepage. They're very upfront about where they get their data from. Nearly there. We're on to the final. It says 5 minutes estimated. Maybe while that's whirring away, we can come back to our notebook LM. So now we've got a little podcast that's been generated from our sources. What I am going to do is, because I don't think I'm sharing audio, let me just stop sharing and reshare. Okay. What I can do is I can play.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have all heard the narrative. I mean, I feel like I live inside this narrative lately.
Right.
It's practically the opening scene of a sci-fi movie. Artificial intelligence.
Just skip forward a little bit. Oh, didn't like that. Great. Excellent start. Maybe if I go into interactive mode. Okay, let's give it a play.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have all heard the narrative. I mean, I feel like I live inside this narrative lately.
Right.
It's practically the opening scene of a sci-fi movie. Artificial intelligence arrives specifically, generative AI like ChatGPT, and suddenly the human brain is obsolete.
Mm-hmm.
Search engines, dead, homework, automated, research, done in seconds while we, I don't know, sip margaritas. The assumption is that we are just handing over the keys to our cognitive kingdom.
Whoa, did someone just break the fourth wall? Let's hear it.
And what I've done is I've just pressed the join button. So I can now join. It's just asking me to approve the permissions. Can you tell me about the methodologies in each of the studies?
That is a great question.
Yeah, that is actually a fantastic interjection.
Because the methodologies are where we see how robust these conclusions really are.
Absolutely. Okay, let's unpack this and maybe reorder our deep dive a little bit.
That's fine with me.
So you can kind of get the idea with Notebook LM. It's a bit gimmicky, I'll give you that. But, if you're on the go, then maybe it is a useful tool. But I'm more interested, and I think the better use for this is having this chat box available for you to actually then get the key points and clicking on this and finding within the text what it's actually referencing. I'm just going to come back over to Elicit now, and we've finally got our report generated. Okay, and if I just scroll down, again, we get a overview of the topic. We've got our question, and it will present the results in a table. You can see it hasn't been able to extract that much information. So maybe for this topic, this is not the right tool to use, okay? And again, I can click on these little asterisks within to get some of the context of that citation over here in the side panel, okay? And you can scroll down, you've got some thematic analysis. Okay, going. Synthesis of all of the research that we've done, or that the AI has done, and then references. So it kind of formats it in like in a helpful way, I think. And you can go through and kind of through each part of the process that it goes through. So finding the right papers, screening the abstracts. Okay, so you can really drill into the thinking, that the process that it's kind of gone through to get to here. Okay, and then you can save it as a PDF. And of course, we can interrogate and ask some of the results. I just want to show you quickly, if I go back to my home page. Now, I'm not sure if it's going to let me see this. I think this was a literature review that I did when I had a paid access. No, maybe it wasn't that one. Yeah, I don't think it's going to let me view it, unfortunately. But if you have paid access, then you can actually instruct it to do a quite in-depth review of the literature around your research question. But I would say get started, have a play around with the free version. And then finally, again, similar kind of deal with consensus here. We've got our free trial before it reverts me to the free version. You can see then I just get limited to this quick, fast search, summary of 10 papers. I can pop my research question in there. I'll pop this over here into the chat. I can see your questions coming in. I'll come back to them in a moment. So I've put my research question in. I get some suggestions down here. I'm going to put it onto Pro, so I get an analysis of 20 papers. I can specify medical journals only. I can also upload papers and just pop them into my library and just analyze those. And then we'll just press play and see what happens. And again, it likes to pop our information into a table. It'll give us a little overview. Okay. Scroll down. Same again. We get some details about the papers that it's referencing. Maybe a full PDF is available. And what I can do is I can even ask it to do more things. So let's see if we can get a literature review. This will probably take a while. So you can see it's whirring away in the background. And it will organize all of our information kind of in this page. Okay. Just going through all of this, and hopefully in 5-10 minutes or so we'll have something. So while it's doing that, let me come over and have a look at the questions here. Wondering more around how we can use AI to help once we've done our initial searches for our literature reviews through the usual database searching methods. Are there any tools that can help things like full text screening or making connections between findings of included papers? I'm slightly apprehensive to even look into this, as it's almost removing our job. We should ourselves be reviewing and critically thinking the relevance of each text and how they synthesize together. Interesting question. I mean, what I'm showing you is a very, very quick, like, introduction almost to some of these tools. You know, like I've shown you that we can upload our own papers, and what I would say is that you can probably guide either an LLM, you know, locally or connected to the web to do that, as long as you're not uploading any papers that aren't copyright protected. But I can kind of see what you mean, like finding the connections between the content. You know, I think with some proper prompting, you can probably get there, but it's not something that I have experience doing. That's a question from Jessica. Any tools that can help, like full text screening? And I mean, I think some of these are kind of looking at a full text screening. You know, it's bringing up the papers that are related to my question. I can upload my own papers if I want to get a quick overview, and I can, you know, just look at the tables that are visible here to, if I just go back to something like undermine, oh no, not undermine, elicit, wherever it was, go back to my question here, you know, getting this kind of table information where I can just quickly, there is another column there, but I can't seem to access it because of my screen. Oh, there we are. So I can quickly, you know, generate a bit of a table like this and pull out key information and see if I can identify any related themes. But again, it depends on whether or not you trust an AI enough to do a good enough job, because it could still hallucinate. It could still get it wrong and say, you know, 2 papers have got similar themes, and then you read them, you've spent, you know, a couple of hours going through all these papers, and then actually they're not related at all. Which doesn't really answer your question, but that would be my thinking around it, is that I don't think it's necessarily removing jobs yet, because we still, us humans, still need to be involved in the process of checking what the AI is outputting. These podcasts from Notebook LM sound so cheesy. They do. And I've actually found that the more papers you upload, the more jumbled they get. Like, it can do quite a good job of summarizing one paper into a podcast, but as soon as you upload more than 3, 4, then it just becomes so confused, and I don't actually think it's that useful. But it's well worth doing, just for the fun. I love that you can make a podcast because I prefer listening to reading. I wonder how long it would take for the podcasters to reach the point where they are actually making useful commentary. Yes. I mean, if you prefer listening, then I dare say that using, like the tools built into Adobe Acrobat or Microsoft Word to read text aloud might be more useful rather than asking AI to generate a podcast. So some of you asked in the chat about libkey nomad. I'm going to show you this quickly, just because it's a really quick and easy thing to show you. So it's a browser extension. So I use Chrome as my browser, but if you've got Firefox, if you've got Microsoft Edge, what you can do is you just search for it, libkey nomad, up here. And then go to the Chrome Web Store, you install it. I've already got it installed. Your university library needs to subscribe to it. And you pop your organization in there. So you can see I've got Goldsmiths. And what it will do is it will link up your institutional access to databases and journals with links across the web. So when you're browsing databases, you'll get that big green button that you saw in the corner of some of my some of the web pages that I was on, indicating that I have access, and you can then just click the link and it'll give you the PDF. Let me just find an example. I don't know if I click on this top one. Yeah, so I've clicked on this. I've got this article here, and then I can see in the corner download PDF. I can then just click that, and voila. But your university library needs to have access to it. So it's a very helpful tool, and it's just a browser extension that works in Firefox, Chrome, and Microsoft Edge. I'm not sure about Safari. Okay, so we'll begin wrapping up now. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask them. You can pop them in the chat. You can unmute yourself. I'll go back to the Padlet. Please feel free to continue adding to this as we go through if you'd like to ask your question here. I hope you had some fun using those tools. Does anybody have any insights to share? Do they think they're useless, that you're never going to use them again? Do you think maybe you can see potential for using them? And I do apologize for the very abrupt breakout rooms. I think there were so many people in the call that it just so many people, it just kind of slowed down, and then all of a sudden everybody disappeared. Let's have a look at the questions in the chat. You talked a lot about the ethics of using AI. Okay, yes, I mean, that's always a big discussion. I do a whole hour-and-a-half session at Goldsmiths just about that, so it's definitely a big area. We mainly agreed that it's useful once you already know the literature well. Yes. What tools do you find very useful for systematic review? I've never done a systematic review, so I don't think I can tell you which tools I would find very useful for doing it. But you can see on some of the tools that they are more geared towards applying the same kind of thinking to all of the different papers. So if you're going through your literature and thinking, okay, what is the methodology? What sample size is being used, because that's what a systematic review is, isn't it? It's going through every piece of the literature with the same system, for want of a better phrase. When you've got your information organized in a table like this, I would say, as somebody who has not had to do a systematic literature review, that would seem the most logical way to do it. You may disagree, but I think, yeah, people ask me all the time, oh, what tools do you use? And I said, well, this is what I sometimes use, but it really depends on the project that I'm working on, the topic that I'm working on. etc. To visualize connections between papers or to ask questions of papers. So I think what we've established here is that it's not going to replace the human-centered literature review anytime soon. We still need to have human experts involved in this process. But some people in the chat seem to have found some little nuggets of wisdom, some new papers that they maybe hadn't considered before, which I think is good. You know, like I say, it's very much one tool that you could use in the process. It's not going to replace the whole literature review process anytime soon. But you know, you never know. You might find something useful in using one of these tools that we've explored today. Let's go back to the Padlet. Oh, okay, we've got some things here. Good for literature review for 50, 60 articles at a time for Google Notebook. Didn't know about this tool. Good at helping you narrow down your research question. Yes, it does take a bit of time to kind of crunch everything, but you do get an email to your inbox. Good but not perfect. Good summaries, 10 papers, not necessarily journal articles. Yeah, so that's one of the big limitations with the list. You get the top 10 papers. If you pay for it, then you get a bit more. But yeah, I'm inclined to agree. You used to get more with the free version, but as with everything, you know, they reduce. They get you in using the tool, make you reliant on it, and then they start taking away the features. Consensus, better as it provides references. Good for STEM, questionable and poor for social science, arts and humanities. Yes, that is a common theme with a lot of these research tools. They do tend to be quite STEM orientated. I do agree with you there. For social sciences, for humanities, for creative arts, maybe they're not as appropriate. Lots of questions around rigor from Helen in the chat there. Yeah, I mean, if we go back to the slides that I shared at the beginning, you know, even with the studies into using Chat GPT and other AI chatbots for doing literature review type activities, it is, you know, that the research says the same, that it doesn't provide the depth really that is required for a literature review for a PhD project, but maybe it's more suited to searching for literature. But again, maybe it doesn't cast the net quite wide enough. Maybe we still definitely need to have a human involved in the searching process. So thank you all very much for attending. I'll wrap it up there. Oh, we've got a final one. Thank you for the session. Yes, please do feel free to share any final reflections. I hope you found it useful. We've gone through quite a lot. I hope you've at least learned something new. Maybe you found out about a new tool that you're going to try out. Maybe you're more convinced of your opinion that actually AI is not going to replace human-centered literature reviews, and that's absolutely fine.